Welcome to Pioneer Mindset, a place where we challenge our mindset and address the discomfort in both business and life by finding clarity resulting in bold conviction. I'm your host, Garrett Ruskamp, fifth generation farmer, husband, and father from rural Nebraska. Whether you're navigating frustration from past decisions or worry about the uncertainty you face today in your business, we're going to learn from our struggles and take on new challenges with a resilient mindset. Join me as I share my journey of struggles I faced in agriculture as a farmer and family man. I'm ready to dive into honest conversations to tackle the mindsets surrounding key issues that rural ag business owners face that will ultimately help you gain control, leading to a profitable and sustainable business. Let's adapt to Pioneer Mindset and get to it. Welcome back, everyone, to this week's episode of Pioneer Mindset. So by the time you hear this, we're getting into the holidays. We're getting into Christmas, kind of that right before Christmas is when this episode is going to come out. And so this is the time of year where everybody's, maybe doing recaps of 2025 or just kind of really thinking about all the successes they had or maybe think about the failures and really just recapping everything. And hopefully as we get into the holidays, getting to next year, we can kind of learn from this year, right? That's the big thing we want to do is we want to learn from everything that we've been through. And that's what I'm going to do on this week's episode. I'm not going to talk about the successes though. Well, I think that's okay. I think it's good to kind of give ourselves a pat on the back and to acknowledge everything that we've been through, all the successes that we've had. I don't want to dwell on the mistakes too much, but at the same time, let's face it, we learn from our mistakes, or hopefully we do anyway, so that way we don't have to keep repeating them. Okay, so if the big thing here, when it comes to Pioneer Farmer, when it comes to me being around my kids, or just kind of the overarching goal I feel like a lot of us have, is if we can, set ourselves up for success, set up the next generation for success, set up the clients that I work with for success, set up you as the listener up for success. Yes, we can learn a lot from, what works for other people, but a lot of times we can learn more if we just learn from the mistakes that other people made. So learning from different challenges that we had and different failures that we had, or looking at all of these mistakes as learning opportunities. And so my dad always says, the only mistakes that we make are the ones that we don't learn from. So let's take all of the mistakes, quote unquote, that we made this last year, and let's turn them into learning opportunities. And maybe they weren't huge mistakes. Maybe there's something that we learned. What did we learn? I always have a reminder that pops up at my phone at 9:00 in the evening that, what did I learn today? And I really like that. Sometimes it's just an annoying reminder that I slough off. But at the end of the day, we need to acknowledge, what did we learn and what are the mistakes that we made so we don't hopefully have to repeat them. And I think if we can acknowledge that, a lot of times it's easier for us to remember the mistakes, remember the challenges that we faced versus the successes. Same thing, like I said, I'm thinking about this almost in the realm of, if we can set up the next generation, if we can set up our kids for success, if we can just prevent them from repeating the same mistakes that we did, are we ultimately not going to be setting them up for success? Not saying they aren't going to go make their own mistakes, and I think there's a lot of value in that. But if we can maybe have this as a way to document what happened in the year 2025, and I would recommend you all, by the way, to do this. I think it's a great thing for us to do, is to acknowledge all the mistakes that we have had, the challenges that we've been through, and then, kind of as a way to document all that. And I'm going to say the number one mistake that I made in 2025 was not writing the mistakes down as they happened. I was thinking about how this would be a really good episode ahead of time. And then all of a sudden I'm like, man, I've made plenty of mistakes. We all do every year. It's always something new. And I'll just kind of go rattle them off. Well, then all of a sudden I sit down, I'm like, geez, I didn't make any mistakes, right? Because you just can't think of anything in the moment. And so that's my number one mistake to start this off, is not writing them down as they happen. Even though every day at 9:00, like I said, I have the prompt that, what did you learn today? I'm not always the best. That's just kind of my guilty human nature. I'm not always the best about recording these things as they happen. So as I tried to think about this last few days, this last week or so, trying to think about the different things that I was going to talk about, we're going to cover different areas here. But the first one, as we actually get into this, is we're going to talk about the communication and some different kind of mistakes that happen, and different learning opportunities, learning lessons that we had in 2025. So communication is going to be one that happens all the time. That's kind of the point with this episode, is I don't want to necessarily bring up something that just keeps happening and keeps happening. And communication is one of those that can always be better. There's always learning opportunities. So hopefully I can bring up some specific events, something that really resonates home or kind of hits home with you, something that really is hard hitting here. And so communication is one that I need to always be better about. But this year, especially, there was some times that I can look back and like, man, I feel like this could have been a lot better. And a couple of those examples, and this one's a little bit generic because I couldn't think of anything specifically, but was assuming that people can kind of understand or know how to do things like I do. And so, for example, my wife helps me out a lot during different seasons of the year, different times throughout the year. And so, this particular story example is through harvest. She was helping us out. We were busy, combining, doing stuff during the fall or harvest season, whatever. And so her job was that I asked her to do was to go to this place and get this pickup that has this fuel transfer tank on the back, take that back to my dad's, and up there, you're going to put the diesel fuel in it and then take it back. So that way dad has it full when he needs it. And so that's the task, right? And so back to the communication side of things is I feel like over communicating is underrated. And I'm definitely trying to do my best to over communicate, but this is one area where I feel short. Okay. And then also kind of back to the communication side is assuming that people kind of understand or know how to do things like we do, or assuming that people have the same nature of just like, say, go figure it out, like we sometimes have to. I'm really guilty of that is like, I'm the person that just has to go figure it out a lot of times. So I assume others can do the same. And when we put them into the position that maybe we don't communicate well enough, we're not exactly setting them up for success. And when they have a mistake, then that mistake reflects on all of us. So what happened here was kind of a funny little deal, and I can share this because we've joked about it, right? But my wife took the pickup back. She took it back up to my dad's and started filling up with fuel. And she calls me. And I'm like, all right, what's this about? And she's like, all right, don't be mad at me, but I think I screwed up. And she's like, is it this tank? Is it the one that's the stand-up tank next to the machine shed? I'm like, no, that would be gasoline. That is not the diesel fuel that we need. And so she was putting gasoline into the diesel transfer tank. And luckily, the tank was empty. So I'm like, all right, I was busy. So I was just trying to talk her through what we needed to do. I said, all right, well, this is what happened. I should have been more clear, but I was meaning the other tank that's next to the shop, the red one, that is the diesel fuel one, got the dyed diesel fuel in there. And so I'm like, what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to go put a little bit of diesel in there. You're going to have to flush the system, do that a couple times. And so I tried to talk her through that whole process, but that was kind of one mistake that, I made by not over communicating. Yeah, you could say it was her mistake, but I should have probably communicated a little bit better there. So I'm going to take some ownership of that one. Another one here, and once again, I really wish I knew the specific instance here, but same thing here with my dad is I do not communicate well enough because I'm one that just kind of like, hey, this is the general basics here. Go do it. Go figure it out. And I can't remember what happened, but there was just kind of a screw up to some extent. And he had got really frustrated with me. And my dad is not one that necessarily gets super worked up or super frustrated with me. But in this instance, he's like, geez, you just didn't tell me what to do. This is not my fault. And I was like, yeah, you're right. This was my bad. I did not communicate well enough. I asked you to do too much, or I expected too much of you. So big mistake there that I kind of lesson learned from this year is I have not communicated well enough. And especially as we maybe get to a point in our businesses where we're trying to detach ourselves or kind of a decentralize, so to speak, and trying to let other people's take over, kind of let go to grow, so to speak, is there's going to be growing pains. There's going to be mistakes. We have to acknowledge that those are going to happen. Okay. So now kind of shifting gears into the farm side of things, into some different things that we learned this year. A big mistake that I think a lot of people in our area learned is should have applied fungicide. All right. Should have applied fungicide on the corn and the timing of that fungicide. Because we did actually apply fungicide on a lot of our corn, but it was too early. We applied at kind of like a V10, and I call that right as we can basically still get across with our ground rig. And I applied that fungicide. And so I still had the fungicide cost, but I didn't have the right timing. All right. And so that's what I learned this year is a big mistake is the timing of the fungicide is huge. That fungicide was basically a waste of an application, a waste of the product at that point because it didn't do us any good. Now, we did have one field that we came in, and we came in with the fungicide around August timeframe. I can't remember what stage that crop in, but it was post-tassel. And this was right in our area. A lot of southern rust and a little bit of tar spot was coming in and really affecting this corn crop and very heavily. And so with that, we did have one field that we applied, and we luckily left a check strip so we could see what the difference was. And I'd say on average, that timing of that fungicide, the check strip was probably 20 to 25 bushels. And so that was real dollars that would have definitely paid for the application, paid for the product. and would have been money back in our pocket. So that was a big mistake that I feel like we can all look back and learn from. But the hard part about some of these mistakes that we can talk about them, they can be learning lessons, but the circumstances that come up in the future may not be 100% the same. So it's always hard for us to say, okay, from now on, I'm always going to apply fungicide, because that doesn't always work. Because kind of another mistake here, another learning lesson would be the fungicide on the soybeans. From all the data that we kind of studied, I don't think the fungicide on the soybeans that we had this year really was a benefit. In other years in the past, I'd say it generally is. So I don't know if that was really going to be a benefit to us this year. Kind of on the same lines with the cropping side of things, we had armyworms, fall armyworms came into some of our alfalfa fields this fall really fast, really hard. So kind of the learning opportunity there was to one, maybe scout more. So that way when they come in, we've been burned by armyworms in the past. And so what happened was they came in, it was like a Friday afternoon. I remember, man, that alfalfa field just looks terrible. Finally went to go look at it. I'm glad we didn't make the mistake of, oh, it's fine, it's just this, that, or the other thing. No, get boots on the ground, get into your knees and try to figure out what's actually happening here. And that's something we probably don't do enough of, but we did it with this field. I'm glad we did. Finally, just say, okay, we got armyworms out here. And we've had them in the past. So we knew exactly what they were. So we know, okay, we should probably treat this field. This was a field that we were planning to take out, but in order to take it out and spray it in the fall, we got to have something there to spray. And these armyworms just devastated this field. So I'm like, all right, we're going to spray this field, and then hopefully we'll get the regrowth to come back up, and then we can cut it or spray it or whatever we're going to do after that. So in this, I made the quick snap decision. It was a Friday afternoon. And the next day, I'm like, I'm going to spray it. I'm not going to wait till next Monday to figure out a plan of action or talk to somebody else to figure out what we're going to do. We're going to spray this field that's infested bad, and we're going to spray the other field that might get it, just because we're going to do it all in one tank fill, right? And so what I actually did is I've been relying on Grok a lot here lately, and the AI version of Grok, and it's been very helpful. But in this case, it just kind of uses the information that it has, and it didn't provide me the most accurate information. I looked up Grok and I said, hey, this is the insecticide products that I have on hand. Is this going to work? And I should have just looked at the label, done my due diligence, not been lazy and not just trying to take the easy way out. I figured out that I was going to use Hero as the insecticide that I have, a really good insecticide, but it's at the end of the day, was not labeled for alfalfa and being able to cut and bale that. Okay, so I sprayed this on 2 of our fields and it was not labeled technically, right? And so all of a sudden I'm off label by spraying this and hoping to cut it and hoping to actually harvest that. And so I saw, okay, it has a 7-day harvest interval window. Let's wait that. It'll be fine. And let's just go ahead and do this, take care of it and get it sprayed. I'm not going to wait. I'm going to get ahead of the game. I'm going to be proactive. In the long run, that actually bit me in the butt, because there was one field that the armyworms are so bad that it wasn't coming back. We sprayed it. We just ended up cutting it and not even harvesting it. We just laid it all out there so that way we could have the regrowth come back. So that one kind of bit me. That was another good mistake there. So lesson learned there. Always read the labels. Don't take the easy way out. Another one here was we were fixing on our truck. In season, we had our truck, the radiator started leaking. So we ended up having to fix on that and go ahead and investigate into that and try to figure out what we're going to do there. And so it was something that we kind of pushed off. I was hoping to get it by. And all of a sudden we were like, okay, it's leaking bad enough. We got to just take care of this so that way it doesn't get any worse, right? So we had a couple rain delays. So we went ahead and took care of it, ordered the radiator, went ahead and replaced it. And with that process of replacing this, I actually had a buddy of me helping me replace this. I noticed that we're putting it together. And with this radiator, it's the core kind of sits into this frame here. And there's some just kind of, not necessarily bolts, but the pins that hold this in. And last time I replaced this, I did not have enough of these pins that were long enough. So I used bolts. Well, I think what happened was that I actually tightened the bolts up too much. So wondering if that's what caused the radiator that I had replaced, because the radiator that was leaking was only a few years old. And so I'm wondering if that's what caused it to start actually leaking again, was maybe I tightened these bolts up and it didn't allow kind of that freedom of movement in there, and that's what caused it to leak. So lesson learned there, don't use bolts and don't tighten them. But in that process of replacing this, the buddy that I got the radiator through, a good friend of mine that's got a shop, he said, well, you might want to just replace some of these clamps at the time. Well, when we picked up the radiator, didn't get the clamps. And so, on a time crunch, wanted to get this thing in because, as it always goes, the next day we're going to be using it. And so didn't have the clamps, like, well, I'll just reuse the old ones, be fine. Well, as we would know it, as you can kind of guess where this conversation is going, we had one of the clamps started leaking. All right. And I should have just replaced it with even a hose clamp or something else. I used the old clamp, and so it started leaking like literally after I was testing it as we were using it the next day. So I thought, crap, and it was one of those where it's the bottom of the radiator. So it would have had to drain everything back out. And so I didn't do that. I was able to kind of get it to seal up for now, but that was a lesson learned there. Always make sure that you replace the clamps when you're doing radiator, or replace something that's old so that way you don't have to worry about it. Another one here, kind of on the same equipment side of things, we had on our combine, as you know, combines have 50 million grease zerks, right? So we had our combine had a bracket that kind of went out. On the left-hand side, we got a big belt that drives the feeder house, drives the header, right? And so there was a bracket on the inside of that went out. Well, when they replaced all of that to get the shims, there's a big belt there that the shivs, I should say, on that belt have to move in and out. So they need to be able to move really easily. And there's grease zerks there to make sure that it stays greased and that it stays lubricated in order to move, right? Well, Dad's usually the one in charge of greasing, and I probably should have clarified, are you getting all of these? He said he was, so I didn't double check it. Well, because it was seized up and because we hadn't been greasing it, they actually had to replace a lot of those shivs, which was a pretty costly mistake there as well. Just to kind of keep moving here, another one that I had was we actually sold our planter, got a different one last fall, sold our planter this spring. It was a Kinsey planter. Tried selling it on Facebook Marketplace for a while and just didn't get any hits, didn't get anything that I was looking for. Asking for, I think it was $35,000 at the time. And I had somebody that offered me like $31,000. Okay. I already at that point listed it with their local auction time agent. I already listed it and it was going to be selling here in a few days. And I'm like, I don't know. I already got it sold. It's on there. If the guy wants it, he can bid it on there. And he had basically messaged me, okay, I've got this other one. I'm going to go buy it. Unless you're going to sell me yours for this $31,000. And I can't remember the exact numbers, but basically it brought less than that. And I had an opportunity to sell it for more. And in that instance, back to the communication side of things, I should have talked with the agent like, hey, by the way, I've got this guy. He's willing to offer me this. Can I just like take this off the sale? Can I sell it for this? Or maybe still pay your commission or whatever it is. I should have done that. And I could have gotten more for this. I would have been money ahead. So that was a mistake that I kind of learned from that one as well. The other one here that I'm going to keep moving here is spraying in the field conditions, always checking the field conditions before you go to spray. We had a new farm that we picked up this year that's probably about 9 miles away. And so I was going down to spray it. We were spraying all of our other fields. And usually what happens is you kind of get in the rhythm. You want to take care of everything all at once so that we don't have to come back or whatever it is. And so we had a little shot of rain that must have come through. And I didn't think nothing of it. I think I looked at my weather app and that was next to that field and it didn't show anything. So I thought I'd be fine. Well, there must have been a shower that came through. I don't know what it was. But when I got down to that field, drove the 9 miles, drove the 20, 25 minutes with the sprayer, got to the field. I'm like, crap, man, there's some wet spots out here. Like it's muddy, it's tacky. What do? Do you go home? You drive the 9 miles back, waste almost a good hour, and then have to come back another day? I'm like, well, we're just going to try it and hope for the best. Hope we don't get stuck out in the middle of this 80-acre field. So we did it. It wasn't perfect. Definitely ran a little bit more cone over than I was wanting to. Had some compaction issues, I'm sure. So that was a big one there, is always check. And on that same token, always check whether it be your field or taking somebody else's word for it. Always check. Because we had a guy that we were going to combine some oats for, do some custom combining. And not necessarily on the field conditions, but what about the crop conditions? So in this case, I was going to go combine the field. And once again, it was probably about 12 miles away. And so it was a good 25, 30-minute drive with the combine. Combine's pretty slow, And so he's like, I think it'll work. I think it'll mix in the dry ones and mix in with the green ones. It'll be fine, right? And so I should have just gotten the pickup, went and checked. Just run over there and check quick. Versus, all right, it'll be fine. We're getting late. We're getting end of July. It should be fine. We should be able to combine these oats and take care of it. Get to the field, and these oats were green. I'm like, this is not going to work. Take a sample, take the town, and they're like 18% moisture. Like, this is not going to work. So we wasted probably a good half a day driving over there, messing around, driving back. And that was one of those things that always check for yourself. Don't even take somebody else's words, because he was like, I think it'll work. No, go check for yourself. And so another one here, and I feel like we've got a lot. All of a sudden we're like, geez, it's all these mistakes, learning opportunities. And this kind of goes back to the communication side of things. is I had somebody else running the sprayer early on this spring, and they jumped in there and should have been no problem. But I didn't communicate as well as I should. Kind of goes back to that. But we had some waterways that I did not tell them, by the way, do not spray those. And it was in a field that had cover crop and then the brome waterways. So they all kind of blended together. Everything was green, right? And it was on rented ground. And I should have told them, by the way, those are brome waterways. You cannot spray those. You got to go around them. And lo and behold, we got them smoked. The herbicide did what it was supposed to. It smoked the waterways, so we're going to have to replant those. But that was just another one of those deals there that happened. Another one that I learned from here was slow down for intersections. And this wasn't necessarily a bad experience. Nobody got in an accident, but to slow down for rough intersections, we've got an air seeder that has basically no suspension on it. And if you hit something that's rough, it's just really hard on it. It can break bolts. It can do other damage to the air seeder. And I saw an intersection. It's one of those deals where looks are always a little bit deceiving. It looked smooth, and I knew better in the back of my head. Maybe the learning opportunity is to trust your instinct and slow down for the intersection. We're in a hurry. We want to keep moving. We don't want to have to slow down. So I went through that intersection really fast, and it was super rough on the air seeder. Didn't necessarily break anything, but had a certain part on the frame that cracked part of a weld. So I ended up having to fix up on that. So always slow down for intersections. Another one there on the equipment side of things is always routinely check lug nuts, check bolts, or in this case, we had our combine that the combine lug bolts on the big duals, I could see in one part of the field, like there's like these little streaks coming out from here, which is always a sign that I don't know, that might be a little bit loose. Yes, sure enough, we had some of these bolts that were coming loose on the combine dual, which would have been a really bad day if one of those broke or one of those came out. Would not have been fun. Luckily, we just tightened them up and away we went. So, if you see something like that, maybe do an inspection ahead of time, maybe see something ahead of time. Do not put it off. Take care of it, okay? And in that same note, we had on our tractor, which is on our air seeder, I had some noise. I could just hear noise as I was driving down the road. I'm like, it was just like a ticking noise. What the hell is this noise? It's driving me nuts. And I looked around, tried to do a visual inspection, couldn't visibly see anything. What is this? That's always kind of your first sign there is like, it'll be fine. But in the back of your mind, like, what if this is something big that we need to actually look into? And it always happens when you're in a hurry and you're like, I need to keep moving, right? I need to just go. And so I was taken off to do a custom seating job that was literally 30 miles away. And as I was taking off, I got probably 5 or 6 miles down the road. I'm like, this is really annoying. What if this is something serious that I need to take care of? I'm like, you know what? I don't want to get 30 miles from home and have a big major issue. So I turned back around, went back home, and I talked to a couple guys and I'm like, hey, what is this noise? Can you help me figure this out? And they're like, yeah, it's probably your wheel weights, inside wheel weights that are loose. Sure enough, once I got back home, they were loose. So I was able to tighten them up and away I went, but it cost me probably a good hour and a half, 2 hours almost. And so that was kind of another learning opportunity there. A couple more here before we kind of get to rounding this out is we have an iPad that we use for our Libra grain cart scale. And the big one there is always to make sure that you, one, have the iPad, and two, make sure the iPad is turned on. So that way it is able to record that data. That's one thing. I kind of got upset with Dad, kind of frustrated because I'm like, hey, you need to make sure that this is on. You need to make sure that this is recording, because it's just always one of those deals that it's nice because it auto records, but it only does that if it's turned on. And then the last one here, when it comes to kind of the farm stuff here, is I'm really bad about, like I said, you could probably see the pattern here is we get in a hurry. We get into just going and it'll work itself out. It'll be fine. We'll worry about it later, sort of thing. And we never take the time to do things right. Maybe the first time, or maybe to, in this case, pack a lunch. Or maybe I always kind of assume, well, maybe I'll be back at some point, or I'll figure out the lunch later. And usually what happens is we always assume that we're going to be back a little while later, and then we never do. And all of a sudden we're without lunch. We're without proper hydration, without water or something like that. We get really crabby because we're hungry or something like that. Somebody has to come save us. Usually it's my wife. So another good kind of chance there to acknowledge that we need to make sure we are preparing ahead of time enough and taking the time to not get in a hurry like we always generally tend to do. Okay. And with that, kind of shift gears a little bit back to like Pioneer Farmer, back to some different learning opportunities here. A lot of things that I learned here, especially when it comes to this podcast right now, as we're recording this, I've had a little bit more time to focus on these episodes. But when we were in the midst of the busy season and harvest season, when I did not have a lot of time, my big learning opportunity there was to make sure you batch these episodes ahead of time. So as we get into the holidays, as the person that actually takes these episodes and edits them a little bit, we work with those people. They require us to have some of these episodes submitted ahead of time. So we actually have to record, say, multiple episodes in 1 week. And we kind of have to batch these episodes and batch this work ahead of time, which isn't a bad thing. And I should have done that going into the busy season, knowing that I wouldn't have time myself to sit down and record these, because you maybe heard it as I was talking in some of those episodes. I just wasn't fully present. I wasn't fully involved in the episode. I didn't take the time to maybe prepare enough to prepare a good episode. So I feel like that was one of those things that I really could have done better. And these are big learning opportunities for me, so that way I can do better going forward as well. And so lots of things that we learned on Pioneer Farmer side of things. Definitely some learning opportunities there. Make sure always preparing ahead of time for whether it be a speaking event, maybe speaking with clients ahead of time, making sure we're doing our best to be prepared. Now, on the family side of things, I could go probably on and on with parenting. Probably not even going to dive into that. That's probably almost a whole another episode. But on the family side of things, or just in general, some random notes here. Ellen and I, this was back this spring. We went on to a little just trip down to Omaha. We went down to get away for a night, just a quick little trip to get away, have some time away to kind of rest up before the busyness of planting and get into that season. And once again, didn't prepare well enough. Always make sure that you have everything packed for the trip ahead of time so that we're not packing last minute. For us in that instant, I did not have my overnight bag, and I didn't even have a change of shoes. I just had one pair of shoes. I didn't have my overnight bag, which has my contacts, which has my toothbrush, toothpaste, all of that stuff, that the deodorant, all that stuff that's really essential, right? I didn't even have that. And so I didn't even hardly have, I had like a change of clothes. I didn't have my shoes. I just was really ill prepared. Just wanted to get out the door as fast as I could. Did not end very well. Granted, we were only gone for a day, so it just wasn't a big deal. We made it work. But that was something there that we can always prepare ahead of time, make sure that we have everything that we need. Last one here on the family side of things is last Wednesday, we actually had a skunk in our front yard. And so my learning opportunity here, my mistake was to shoot the skunk in the front yard versus waiting till, maybe scurried off or ran away to where it was further away from the house. Because the way our house is set up, the wind always kind of swirls back towards the house. It doesn't matter what the wind direction is. So I shot it. I wanted to take care of this little guy because he's been bothering me for a long time. And he was in the front yard eating the dog food and literally like 15 feet away from the house. I took care of him, got him, but then everything within the house kind of smelled. And it was just not the most pleasant experience there. I feel like I've covered a lot today and you're just like rambling on, and all these experiences that I've had, I hope that they're somewhat valuable to you. And I hope that you can kind of acknowledge some of the different mistakes or learning opportunities that you've had this last year. So that way we can hopefully make sure that we don't continue to go through the school of hard knocks, because the school of hard knocks, we always have to pay that tuition. But what really sucks is when you have to pay that tuition twice, when you have to continue to keep learning and keep repeating these mistakes that we have. That's what really sucks. And that's ultimately the goal here with sharing a lot of these things. Maybe none of these that apply to you. Maybe you'll never be in these circumstances where you can even remember any of these. But maybe you can take some time for yourself, for your kids, for your employees to write down some of these different things that we can learn from. So that way we don't keep repeating them and we don't have to go over and over again and repeat these, right? So I hope there was some value in this week's episode. I hope that there's something you could take away. Please, by all means, share some of the big mistakes that you've made, the big learning opportunities. Maybe there's something that I can learn from you. Share with those around you and have fun with it. The big thing here is I don't want us to get down in the dumps with all the big mistakes that we've made here, all the challenges that we've had to face, and everything that we've been going through. Maybe you've been in the year of the suck fest, and it's been a really hard time, really rough times. I don't want us just to continue to dwell on that. But with that, there are learning opportunities. So I hope you found value in this week's episode. Otherwise, we will catch you on next week's episode as we get to rounding out this 2025. We've got a couple really good episodes here as we round the year out. And so stay tuned for those, but I'm looking forward to continuing these conversations. Thanks again for supporting us here at Pioneer Mindset, and we look forward to catching you guys on next week's episode. Thanks for tagging along with me today as we sharpened our mindsets. If you've gained insight from today's episode, be sure to take a screenshot to share or send this episode to somebody who might also find value in it. For more, follow me on Instagram @GarrettRuskamp or on Facebook, and join me next time for more conviction through clarity.